credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Shankin. Today, I'm joined by Brian Kimpson. Brian is an artist, athlete, entrepreneur, and the host of the Intent Podcast, a podcast focused on empowering people to live a more meaningful life through the expansion of awareness and consciousness. The Intent aims to shift the paradigm through inquiry into spirituality, optimal living, and self-development. I'm excited about talking about many of those topics and more. We had a great call the other day. So Brian, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, man. Excited to be here, and thanks for having me, and thanks for the pep talk the other day. Get me going back on the podcast. It really is a fun experience and fun way to meet people and have very, very in-depth conversations that bring a lot up and help you to learn and think about things in a different way. So appreciate you.
Of course. Yeah. I was also going to open with a little bit of that. I don't want this to be too much of a meta conversation, a podcast about podcasts, but I called you the other day, connected, because a long time ago, a multiple time guest on my podcast, Mike Lucchese, and like mutual connection of ours, he recommended that I reach out to you. And we have a number of mutuals on Twitter and whatnot. So I reached out because I was curious, and it's been a while to like a little bit of back and forth trying to get on the phone. And then similar to another mutual connection case, I had reached out to him as well. And both of you guys, ironically, were in a similar spot where it was like, hey, appreciate the reach out, just not really feeling the medium right now. And in both cases, like I was able to, I guess, massage the offer enough to like open the door. And yeah, I'm really happy that you were in the place where you were open to facilitate the conversation, because I think regardless of where it goes, what we cover, at bare minimum, like sans recording, like this will be a conscious conversation between two interesting people, and hopefully you can take something from me, I can take something from you. And the benefit, as we discussed on that call, was that many people get to benefit from this. Like it's an infinite lever that, like, whether it's one person who listens, 100,000 or a million, we get to create that value for the world. And it'll be awesome to see what it kind of turns into.
Totally. And just to touch on that, like podcasting for me and having conversations like this for me is something like, if you've done any sort of like physical exercise that is super beneficial for you. Let's take like yoga, for example. Like yoga for me is something that whenever I do it, I'm like, man, this is it. Like this is something that I want to be doing, that I need to be doing, right, for my body, mind, and soul. And then I'll take like 3, 4, 5, 6 months off of doing it, and then I'll come back to it and be like, oh, like what am I doing? Like not doing this every single day. And it's like, podcasting is kind of like that for me. And then when you brought it up in conversation the other day, it's like just flipped a switch for me. It's like, oh, like this is one of those things, like making the time to have very intentional, conscious, directed conversations that help to open you up to new perspectives and ideas and things like that. It's where the money is. It's magic. So super excited to be here and get into this.
And I do want to touch on that before we kind of get into things like, why do you think, because that is a common through line. I know that's a very common felt experience for anyone listening. There are all kinds of things in life, whether it is the gym, whether it is the outreaches for business, whether it is yoga. It's like all of these different practices, like we consciously and intellectually understand how beneficial they can be, but for whatever reason, we can't bring ourselves always to do the thing. And some people find it very easy to be disciplined in the gym, and so that might be easy for them, but it might be very hard for them to have a meditation practice or a journaling practice. And then for other people, it might be the flip. What do you think about us or about people returns to that kind of like self-defeating nature, if you will?
Well, I think that society makes it really easy to self-defeat in that regard, or very easy to stray from what you know you need to be doing and what makes you you, or makes you feel full and whole, and fulfilled, because there's just so much going on all the time, right? There's a million different things happening all at once that are all vying for your attention. And we're just searching, I think. And this is true. I maybe shouldn't speak for everybody, but it's true in my case, like searching for this thing that's going to make you feel whole or complete, and always looking for like the next thing, right? So I think it makes it really easy to get distracted in today's Western society by like all these different things. Oh, ooh, I'll try this out. Ooh, I'll try this out. Ooh, I'll try this out. And then your time is taken up with all of these other things, and then you're left either unfulfilled or left forgetting about the thing that you actually enjoy doing. And if you can do that thing for long enough, it becomes ingrained in you, where to the point that you know, like, this is what I need to be doing. Like, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I enjoy doing. This is what I know I should be doing for me to be and feel like my true self. But when you have, social media and all of these voices, Twitter, all of these people talking at you, all these talking heads throwing all this information at you and their ideas and what they think you should be doing, it makes it really easy to stray from that path, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I hesitate a little bit to, and I know this isn't particularly your intention, but like to, I guess, like externalize the blame, or like kind of allow the outside to be the reason why. But I do agree, like a noisy environment, like it creates ultimately, like I think the reason is, or like my thesis would be that our brain, for better or for worse, and sometimes it is better and sometimes it is worse, is really, really effective at choosing the path of least resistance. And so society and all these frameworks have created a low friction path, which is typically a self-defeating one, which is like continue to scroll, continue to numb, eat the easy, like unconscious process nonsense, like choose all of these things that are lower friction in the short term, but likely will create all kinds of tumultuous friction mentally, physically, etc. down the line. And that's why I think, like, as when you want to take the agentic view, it's like, okay, the external is what it is. How can I set up ways that make the thing that I want to do low friction for me? How can I minimize the friction to action on whatever the task is? So like if it means, okay, I want to run in the morning, set out the running shoes, set out the outfit the night before. I want to eat healthy. Maybe that means meal prep for you. Maybe that means don't keep certain food in the house. I want to have a journaling practice. Well, figure out, put that on the calendar just like you would put another meeting. Like make sure, and there's a million and one ways for all of those different verticals. But I think it is kind of like our tendency, and it is ultimately a superpower. Because like you said, I like the word you said, ingrained. It is like a well-worn path in your mind. You're trying to create that like neural path for whatever it is. Eventually it becomes unconscious. And that's when the low friction ability of the brain is magic, because now it's effortless to train, to journal, to meditate, to learn, to create. But yeah, I do think it's a bit of a duality there, the internal external worlds.
100%. Yeah. And like that's another point too. It's like you really have to develop that internal world. Like you have to spend time with yourself to actually know who you are and what you need and what voices to be influenced by. Because like, fact of the matter is, social media is magic. Like social media is incredible to be able to connect with people like this, to be able to consume valuable knowledge and information. It's huge, but it can, if you let it, become a detriment to your evolution very easily.
And I think I love the fact that your podcast is called The Intent, because I think that living with intention, like i.e., you are choosing with intention the things that are in your life, that choosing the way that you use social media, the things that you consume, not only physically, but intellectually, is powerful. Can you open the window a little bit into why you chose to name your podcast The Intent?
Yeah. Well, it's just kind of, I mean, for lack of a better word, it's just very random. To be quite honest, it's just the product of a brainstorming session. Just thinking, okay, like what are we gonna name? Like, what are we gonna name this podcast? Like, there are so many podcasts out there. What really fits me and what I want to do with it? Like, what is the intention with this podcast? And that may have actually been the question that was like, oh, maybe we just call it the intent or the intention. Like, that would be pretty cool. And then thinking deeper into that brainstorm and into that idea of calling the podcast the intent, it really, really hit home for me that, like, intention itself really lies at the core of everything that we do. It's like, if you consider, like, the idea or subscribe to the idea that, like, we're all powerful creators of our reality. We're all manifesting everything in our reality 24/7. We might just be manifesting things that we don't want sometimes, and some of us are better at manifesting things that we do want. But behind that lies intention. It lies us asking ourselves and us getting quiet and centered in ourselves to ask ourselves, what do I want to create? Like, what am I moving towards? And who am I being in that? And behind that is intention. Right? It's the energy that we move through life with, and the direction that we are putting that energy towards. And I think that's really, really cool when you think about it in terms of, creating a better planet, creating healthier humans, creating a healthier individual. And I subscribe to the idea that we can't really affect change outside. Like, the external is, I mean, in my philosophical ideology, is just an illusion, and it's just a reflection of the internal. So all that we are really ever in control of is what's going on inside of us. And if we can get that right, then everything outside is going to fall into place and into harmony with that as well. So I think that's really the train of thought that kind of coalesced into wanting to call the podcast the intent. Because I think everything really just comes back to our intention with our life, our intention with our energy.
Completely agree. There's a tremendous amount of alignment with kind of my also working theses, philosophical frameworks for how I view reality. And you touched on something really important, which is we are constantly manifesting. I mean, obviously this is a statement of belief, but we are constantly manifesting our external reality. And that is regardless of whether you are consciously doing it or unconsciously doing it. I like a quote from Jung, which is, until you make the unconscious conscious, you will continue to suffer, something to that effect. And I do think that a lot of times in life, our unconscious is running. It's like the software that is running our simulation. It's running our reality. And until we can bring, like you talked about, spending time with yourself, bringing awareness to what might be the frameworks that are filling that kind of software statement, it may or may not be what we want. And we may look at our external world and be like, I really hate that I continue to attract toxic relationships, or I continue to not have the amount of money that I want, or the body that I want, or the lifestyle that I want. What are some of the practices that you've found for your internal world to be the most efficacious and also sustainable for raising those levels of awareness?
I know this wasn't the question, but if I were to pick just one thing, hands down, meditation. And for me, meditation looks like just sitting with an erect back on a cushion to raise my hips up above my knees. That's the most comfortable way to do it for me. Just sitting up straight, like not in a chair, because then it's really easy to like lean back and just kind of relax. Like, you really want a straight spine so that you're, a good term would be like alert. Like, in meditation, you don't want to be like feeling drowsy or sleepy, like you want to be alert so that you can be, to the best of your ability, attentive to what's happening in your mind and in your body, so that you can start to develop this awareness for what it feels like to be sucked into your thoughts. And a lot of people think that in meditation, your thoughts are supposed to just stop, and they feel like they're failing if like their mind just keeps going. They keep thinking of things and scenarios, and all this stuff keeps coming up. Like, that's going to continue to happen. That's the nature of the mind. Your job is to pay attention and notice like what's going on, what's coming up, and then bring yourself back to a broader scope of awareness that exists outside of just being myopically focused on like one thought or one situation. And in doing that, I mean, if you're sitting down for 5 to 10 minutes a day, it really takes me about 15 minutes to really get into like a good flow of being aware of the fact that I'm like stuck in a thought pattern or something. Like, if you sit down for long enough, you're going to really start to notice when you get caught up in thoughts. And it's really difficult for me to explain, at least at this point in my journey, what it feels like to expand outside of being caught in a river of thoughts. I think it was Ram Dass that said, you're standing on a bridge over a river, watching yourself go by. And I might be butchering that, but if you kind of take that image, you can imagine yourself just standing on this arced bridge and a river is passing underneath, and you are also in a boat on the river going by, and then you're going by again and going by again, and you're just that watcher. And I think that's also a term that's been used by a lot of spiritual researchers, meditators, that you're the watcher. And that's an important distinction, I think, that can help a lot of people to view the relationship of themselves and their thoughts, because we aren't our thoughts. We aren't what's happening in the mind. We're much greater than that. We're outside of that. We exist outside of that. And so many people get caught up in this loop of just getting stuck in these thoughts and in these worries and in these anxieties. And when I do that, I find that it's very difficult to have awareness for what's actually happening, right? Because a lot of the times, like you were saying before, like the mind uses those ingrained habits and those worn in paths to conserve energy. And those are just programmed and conditioned from experiences that we've had throughout our lives and from our childhood and things like that. And those things are just, boom, automatic. And those are the habitual thought patterns that we exhibit. And if we don't take time to slow down, get really, really quiet and centered in ourselves and in that seat of being the watcher, it's very hard for us to exist outside of those conditioned thought patterns. But when we meditate, it's I shouldn't say very easy, but it becomes easier and becomes possible even to see those patterns as they come up and ask ourselves from that place of unconditioned awareness, like, oh, is this serving me? I'm noticing that this pattern is coming up. I'm getting frustrated at this person or my partner or something like that. Is that something that's actually, like, is that me? Like, do I want to become frustrated at things like this? Do I want to be so easily triggered? Then those questions become possible to ask ourselves. Whereas if we're just stuck in those pattern thoughts, it's very, very difficult to, and maybe even impossible, to make decisions that are greater than those conditioned patterns. So I think meditation, I mean, for generating and building awareness is bar none the highest ROI activity that you can do, especially in today's world where we're moving so fast, need to do everything all at once. It really is kind of challenging the status quo to shut everything off and sit in a quiet room with no moving, no talking, nothing for, even just 20 minutes. Like 20 minutes will make a huge difference every day. That's 20 minutes, a 24-hour period. The amount of time most people spend scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or, whatever, just doing random stuff on their phone, answering emails. It's like hours a day. So meditation is a big one for me.
It is massive. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, you touched on a lot of really, really valuable insights. And I do think that like probably one of the most important that stands out is that you are not your thoughts. The like identification with and distance from stimulus and response is what causes most people's suffering. And we can circle back to that. But I do think, including myself, meditation has somewhat of a romantic, it can be viewed somewhat romantically by many people, right? Like, I want to meditate. I want to be still. I want to be in this place where I'm calm. I have more control over myself. I see the world kind of differently. It's extremely hard to make it a consistent practice. Again, like we talked about at the very beginning, for whatever reason, we know we should, but it becomes extremely, extremely hard for all kinds of reasons, whether it's external stimulus or you sit down for the first time and you can't get your mind to stop racing, or you immediately cling to the first thought that comes through that river, and then you're tied to that immediately. A hard thing to prescribe, I would say, meditation, but if you had to be prescriptive or maybe even just walk back through your journey to being more consistent with it, what would you say would be the path to, I've never meditated before, but I really, really want to have that kind of stillness in the mind, and I want to make this a regular practice, to I am doing those things and I am doing it consistently?
This might be a little meta, but I think, I think you could agree with this. Like, why? Knowing why is super, super important, especially when it comes to sitting and doing nothing, right? Like, that just doesn't make sense to the Western mind. Like, sit and do nothing, like, why? When I could do a million other things. So knowing why you're doing it is super important. And that might take a fair bit of self-reflection. I know in my experience, that's really what it took. And depression, which also helped that, for me to ask myself like a lot of the deeper questions, like, what am I doing here? Like, what do I want? And a lot of exploration into like spirituality and religion and things like that. And I think depending on where your aspirations are at, like if your aspirations are very material, like I want to make a ton of money, I want to drive this car, I want to date this girl, I want to, have all these things, it's going to be more difficult for you to develop a consistent meditation practice unless you subscribe to the idea that everything that exists outside of you and everything that you have access to in your life is just a reflection of what's going on internally. Then it'll probably become easier for you. But I think it takes a lot of mental gymnastics or exploration into what it is that you truly want for it to be something that you stick with. And I don't think that, me telling you, like looking you in the face and being like, you need to meditate because it's going to help you a ton, that's not going to do it for most people. So it takes a fair bit of self-reflection. But if I were to prescribe somebody who is genuinely asking me like, hey, this is really difficult for me to keep consistent with, like, I know that I want to be doing it, but it's just like really hard. I think what you said before about like running, being preemptive and proactive is super beneficial, especially for meditation. I think that if it doesn't happen at the very start of your day, it's not going to happen, at least in my experience. That has been the case for me. It's very difficult for me to stop what I'm doing once my day has started to build momentum, to sit down and do nothing, unless like my day has gotten like super tumultuous and I'm just like, yo, I need to pump the brakes and like sit down, because like we're not centered right now. So I would say, plan it out the night before, even write about it, set an intention to like, all right, for the next 7 days, I am going to, at the start of my day, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to make my bed, and I'm going to meditate for, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's the first thing that I'm going to do. I'm not going to do anything else besides maybe have a glass of water. Because once you start your day, once you get things going even a little bit, it's just a thought in the back of your mind, and it's going to get forgotten about. And then it's going to be, 2-3 p.m. and you're going to be like, oh, shoot, I meant to meditate this morning. I totally forgot. So like it really needs to be made a priority, at least while you're still building that ingrained road in your brain, in those neurologic pathways. Like building that pathway is super, super important. So you have to be super intentional with something like meditation, especially if you've been raised in a Western society like the US.
Yeah. And I definitely agree. And it is, I think having that why, Simon Sinek, amongst many others, talk about the importance of having a really, really big why. And that must exceed the discomfort or friction or resistance to the other thing. It has to be a deep, deep motivator. Ideally, you can rope in how it would affect other people as well. And it can be really, really powerful. But you did start out that little monologue with something important, and kind of alluded to that dark place that forced you to ask some of those bigger questions, forced you into this world, as I call it, of self-mastery. So I like to typically start the podcast by hearing a little bit about like, what was the impetus, if you had to point at one thing? Obviously it's more of an unfolding than a specific event, but what was kind of the entrance to your hero's journey personally? Like what sent you into the world of self-mastery? What really expanded your awareness from just some kid raised in the West to, I'm going to be exploring these things like spirituality, religion, the internal world, and like becoming the best version of myself?
Yeah. I just got sick of my own shit, man. Like I spent, so many years from like, man, the time I was probably like 16 or maybe even 15 to the time I was like 23, just like smoking so much weed, drinking a ton. And I think it was just like through, just getting so sick of like the abuse of stimulants and uppers and downers and stuff that very clearly are not the answer, right? That I was just like, what am I doing? Like, what is, like, I'm sending myself to an early grave. Like, none of the things that I'm doing are healthy. Like, it really took me getting to a place of, I wouldn't consider myself at any point like overweight or crazy unhealthy. Like I've always been like fairly active, but I mean, it really took me just like an excessive use of like stimulants and the occasional like party drug and things like that to really like take a step back and be like, is this who I want to be? Like if I was 35 and I was still doing these things, or if I was 40, I'm a dad, like are these things that I really want to continue to do? And if they're not, why the fuck am I doing them? I'm sorry if the explicit, if you have to throw the explicit tag on this, but like that was really the conversation. that I had with myself. It's like, what is the point of this? Like, why am I doing this? And it really came down to like the answer of just like, I'm not okay. Like, I don't feel okay. Like, I feel anxious, I feel depressed, and I'm just using these things as an escape from that. So that conversation kind of led me down this path of self-betterment, self-help, if you will, too. I love the fact that a lot of really, really good books, even like spiritual texts, are in like self-help sections in the library, and they're like labeled self-help, and self-help has become like, it's very like taboo thing, like, oh, you read self-help books and things like that. But at the end of the day, like, no one's coming to save you. Like, you're the one that's going to have to help yourself and dig yourself out of whatever holes you've dug yourself into. So that was really kind of like a brief overview of what happened with me, and kind of led me down this path of self-development and self-betterment, self-evolution.
What did it look like to start stepping out of that? Because like we've talked about, all of those are well-worn paths. Not only do you have the kind of psychological consistency of substance abuse, negative thought patterns, etc., but then there's also substance dependence on top of that. What did that look like to walk yourself out?
I think one thing that I always kind of reflect on and think about how big of a help it was we don't all have access to like mentors or people that are further along than us, but we do have access to books. And I look at books as the compilation of years and years and years, lifetimes of people's experience and what they have chosen to coalesce into this 200-page thing that can help you in an infinite amount of ways. Like, I'm sure you've read a book, 5 years ago that you then pick up later and you're like, well, this is a completely different book. And I think there's a lot of power in books, and something that I, going back to that first thought, something I frequently come back to, and I actually thought about this the other day, is like Tim Ferriss, like his books and his book Tribe of Mentors specifically, I feel like kind of fanned the spark that eventually turned into the flame of like me really caring about my well-being and really directing energy internally to make my life better, and taking like the reins on that. Tribe of Mentors was a super, super powerful book for me. So very grateful for Tim Ferriss for, many different things, but really surrounding yourself with an environment that helps to promote your intention and like your goals. So like surrounding yourself with books that have been recommended by hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people, like Think and Grow Rich, how to make friends and influence people, any of Deepak Chopra's books, Don Miguel Ruiz. Like, there are so many things out there that you can start to bring into your life, and so many things that you can start taking out of your life. Like, take an audit of your relationships. Who are the people that you're hanging out with, and what is your relationship to them? If you took alcohol and substances out of your life, would you still be friends with those people? And it's like really taking account for the environments that you put yourself in, and asking yourself whether or not they are serving the highest expression of yourself or not. And if they're not, bye-bye. Like those, and you really have to be ruthless at the start of this, and very, very, and I think this was difficult for me, and it's super uncomfortable to be brutally honest with yourself. It's like when we've had relationships with friends for, 6, 7, 8 years, it can be really, really hard to not give them the benefit of the doubt and put our needs behind what other people are going to think of us, right? So it can be very difficult to start to cut out relationships. And I think relationships are something that hold a lot of people back at the onset of things like this, because it keeps them in this kind of same like energetic attunement to that level of consciousness or that level that the relationship was built at. And it can be very uncomfortable to step out of that, if that makes sense. And it's kind of like, I think that's a little abstract, but I think something that a lot of people will understand a little bit better is like a job that's clearly not working for you anymore. Like say you're 17 and you're working at McDonald's and you're now 21 or 22, you've evolved quite a bit, hopefully. And there might be conflicts at work. You're getting frustrated at work. And it's just, you've risen to a level of consciousness that is far beyond what your current environment was built at. And it's time for you to break out of and evolve past that and accept new into your life. And new can only come in when you let go of the old.
Definitely. And I mean, you touched on a lot of value there. And I do think I do agree with the assessment that relationships are, and the environment and people, fear of judgment, like that kind of animalistic nature we're fighting against, that fear of judgment, don't want to be excluded from the tribe kind of thing, is a massive limiting factor. And for better or for worse, I think somebody in the zeitgeist that's doing a really good job of like swinging the pendulum the other way is Hermosi right now. And obviously the Twitter timeline is kind of going off about that. We are in the holiday season right now, so there's a lot to be discussed around returning to potentially an environment that you've evolved out of, left intentionally in the past, people like that. And I shared something on my Instagram story the other day because I'm similarly back visiting family, loved ones for the holiday season. And I was able to visit my previous university as well as fraternity. And even though it hasn't really been that long time wise, it feels like I've lived kind of another lifetime since leaving. And it was a very surreal experience. Like I didn't place judgment on it or anyone there. I just tried to play, like you said, the observer. And it was really, really interesting. The Heraclitus quote, like you even kind of alluded to it, talking about meditation, but like no man goes to the same river twice because the man has changed and the river has changed. And a ton of people resonated on like I got a bunch of engagement on that story. And I do think that this is like worth touching on because that fear of judgment of others is the thing that people allow to, whether they're conscious or unconscious of it enough, to stop them from chasing their dream, becoming the highest version of themselves. And when it is like put down in plain text, when you write it out or state it out, like, are you going to let Jim's opinion of you stop you from living a life of total fulfillment, the highest version of yourself possible? It sounds insane, but until it's brought to that like conscious awareness and you're like, oh, it really is what my mom thinks of me, or that ex that still follows me on that Instagram account that I won't post that first thing, or whatever it may be. I think, yeah, for whatever reason that we have that. And I do think it is, we're kind of battling that animal nature, right? Like we don't want to be excluded from the tribe. But it is an illusion of the mind. It is simply that they are either not thinking about you at all, or if they are, and they're actually all talking shit about you behind your back. Like, do you even want to be at that table? Do you want to be in the room where they're like, what happened to the old blah, blah, blah? Like, oh, big self-development guy now. Ah, big podcaster, like big content guy. It's just like, do you want to be surrounded with that energy? The answer ultimately obviously is no, but how did you in that early stage where you had made the internal shift, but the external environment had not, you didn't have enough evidence, I guess, externally to justify the new environment? How did you begin to seek out, other than books, I guess, that new external environment? And did it require a period of solitude?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, the solitude piece is huge. I think during the time when I was like really starting to like change my internal world and change my life a bit, uh, I'd started working a new job, and that provided me like the opportunity to just like work a ton, which really caused me to focus on prioritizing my time outside of work, which was, there were very few hours in the day for me to actually spend on myself. So I was like, all right, well, not going out and clubbing, not going to be drinking, not going to be smoking, because I need to wake up at 5 a.m. or like earlier if I want to get anything beneficial done in my day for myself before going into work. So I was kind of forced in that regard to start prioritizing my time a lot better. And I would be like working late nights a lot of the time. So it kind of forced me to prioritize in a lot of ways. But I also think that like setting boundaries with not only with myself, but with other people was something that helped me as well, that people can start doing today. It's like, you start with even a little bit of self-reflection and you start to decide like, oh, like this thing that I've been doing and that I do with these group of people or these friends, like doesn't really serve me anymore. And it's not something that I want to continue to do. You know, having a conversation with those people, or, you know, with yourself, and expressly stating like, hey, this isn't really of interest to me anymore. And if those people can accept that, or if they like deny that, right, and they, like you were saying, like, oh, like big content creation guy, or oh, like big entrepreneur guy, like how's that business doing, dude? Like if that is the response that you're receiving from people, like those are very, very clear signs from life that like those boundaries are not going to be upheld by that individual. And it means that they are not accepting of who it is that you are communicating to life that you want to be, in the direction that you're going. And I think that's really some of the power that our voice carries with it, like us expressing to life, to the world, and to the people around us where we're going. And if people can't accept that from us, or they, you know, ridicule, make sarcastic jokes about that, make fun of us, like very, very clear communication from life that like those people are not for us and where we're going. So I think boundaries and just using your voice is super, super powerful in those times.
I couldn't agree more. I think you have to express, and like in the word itself, like you are externalizing what is inside of you, because oftentimes it is an internal shift, right? You started reading, but it's typically behind closed doors. Maybe you're meditating, you're making massive transformations. Maybe it's just a decision you made. You said like, today, I'm not going to be the version of me that has done X, Y, and Z. Well, the only place that exists is in your mind. So far, you haven't then built a stack of evidence that I am an entrepreneur, a content creator, a athlete, a whatever this new version that you're stepping into. So until it becomes an expression, you're not giving the external world a chance. And a helpful exercise that I have in my program with the guys that I work with, and I think would be helpful for people in the audience for boundary setting, because I think it's a superpower if you can get yourself to do it. But for many of us, if not most, it was never demonstrated to us how to set boundaries in a healthy way. And it can be a big thing to bite off. Like, hey, you're going to have to talk to somebody that you have this really complex and potentially intimate relationship with, whether it's friend, loved one, family member, partner, etc. You're going to have to change the terms of agreement that have been kind of unconsciously established up and until this point. That's a lot. So one thing that I have my guys do, and I think is worthwhile exercise for anyone, and you can do this even for your relationship with substances as well. If you don't have a person that you have a toxic relationship with, but maybe it's content consumption, maybe it's pornography, sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever, write a letter expressing exactly what you would say if they were in the room, because it gives you permission to speak freely without having to actually say it to them. You're not reading their body language. You're not reacting. You're not getting cut off. And you can go slow. You can cross stuff out. You can edit it, but you get eventually to the place where like, okay, I've spoken the maximum of my truth to this person or this substance or this relationship. you can read it back and sit with that. And then the next level up is like, once that's out there, is it worthwhile having that conversation and expressing what you've just written to that person in finality? And if you can get yourself to then bring that note in the form of a conversation to that person, like now you have set a boundary, you've communicated your thoughts clearly. But the kind of slower nature of writing that letter out, I think, allows you to avoid the potential that you might step on toes. You might put your foot in your mouth and say something you didn't necessarily intrinsically mean, but it was the first thing that your brain brought the word to the mouth. And it's really hard when you're looking in the eyes of somebody you care about or cared about you, and things start to get complicated. It does complicate the situation. So again, in solitude, writing it out, I think, can be really, really helpful. And I've noticed for myself and for the guys that I work with that it is tremendously helpful.
Yeah, no, that, I mean, just the act of writing letters too, like even if the letters never get sent, right, it's just such a good exercise in like developing more clarity around like what it is that you want, what it is that you're feeling, like what is actually going on in your life. So yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
It is massive. I want to circle back to the intent podcast, yourself shifting from, because one of the things I also talk about in my program, and I think is a massive thing for human beings, and part of our conversation the other day was seeing yourself as an artist, doing an act of creation on a regular basis. Walk me through a little bit of like your decision to go from person, generic, doing self-improvement work to, okay, I'm actually going to become a creator, not only of like my reality, but things. I want to make art. I want to express myself through an act of creation on a semi-regular basis. How did you make the shift from maybe consumer to creator? And what was that like for you?
Well, I think that mindset shift from consumer to creator or producer, like that specific mindset shift really happened over the last like 2 years. I mean, I've been creating things since, 2012, 2013. Like photography and cinematography was really like my medium for the longest time. And that's, one of the reasons that I got myself out of my hometown and moved to, the West Coast, moved to California, and got into freelance photography and aerial cinematography and stuff like that. So I've been doing like visual arts for quite some time, but it was never really like a thought in my mind of like, oh, like I'm a creator versus like a consumer. I'm just making things, right? But I've always kind of considered myself like a very creative individual, and I think like it's my personal belief that every single individual on this planet is a creative being. Like we are creations, and by our very nature, the fact that we are energy moving through these bodies, we're all creative. Like whether you realize it or not, like everything you do is a form of artistic personal expression. And I think that's really all an artist is somebody who has found a way or found a medium in the physical plane to express their unique energy, right? And I think that we all have the capacity to do that. And some of us just block ourselves from doing it because it's either uncomfortable or, like we were talking about earlier, there's fear. There's fear of being seen and not accepted. There's fear of being unworthy or fear of somebody not liking our stuff, which is just a direct reflection of who we are, which then if somebody doesn't like that, oh, fuck, that's scary. Like, if somebody doesn't like me for who I am at my rawest, at my core, like I'd die. Right? And that's the conversation that a lot of people have with themselves. It's like, okay, this is way too scary to actually create things. So I think we are all creators. But to your original question, I think I've always just kind of been in tune with myself creatively. It's, I think, been more uncomfortable to not make things throughout my life than it has been to create things. Obviously there are times where it's like, oh, well, like, shoot, what if somebody doesn't like this? Like, maybe I just won't post it, or maybe I just won't make it, or yada, yada. But I think at the end of the day, I look for approval from myself more than I look for approval outside of myself for a lot of the things that I create. And I think making that shift mentally to not seeking that external validation for the things that you create is very important. And I think that's something that really shifted for me over the last few years, is really just asking myself, like, okay, why am I making this? Like, is this like true energetic and artistic expression from myself? And am I enjoying making this? Like this cup, like, I know if somebody's listening to this, they can't see it, but it's like, okay, this cup, I made this cup. Like, did I make it for myself? Did I, or was I carving it or shaping it because I was hoping that somebody else would like it? And I saw just a brief snippet from like a Rick Rubin interview the other day, and he was like, I'm not thinking about the audience when I make things at all. Like, I'm thinking about myself. Like, do I like this thing that I'm creating? Because I'm creating it for me. Like, I'm expressing myself. I'm not expressing for an audience so that I can be liked, right? I'm expressing something that's coming from inside of me. So making that shift, really, and that's for a lot of people, and for myself over the years included, like, that's been a mental battle of asking myself, like, okay, like, am I seeking external validation? Am I making this so that other people like me, or so that I can get a ton of views? Because that's always going to be vapid. Like, the result of that is always going to be like more insecurity, right? Like, if you create something so that other people like it, and God forbid one person doesn't like it, that's going to bring up that insecurity, which is going to then make you seek more validation and more validation and more validation until that insecurity is dealt with, accepted, and acknowledged and integrated. Does that answer your original question?
Yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
I keep going on tangents.
And you touched on some good stuff, and I will bring up the devil's advocate opinion for creation, and then also address it, because I've been mulling this concept over now that I'm also in about the last year and a half shifted a lot more. Like, I came from a very technical background, always had, I suppose, these kind of creative ideas, and had my versions of making things when I was younger, but very like, it was a sharp contrast of like, okay, now I'm making a podcast, now I'm making content online, now I'm a creator now. Like, that was a very hard shift for me, and hard in the difficult sense, but also hard in the abrupt sense. And I've had to battle with am I making it for me? Am I making it for the results? And especially when you tie it in with business and you're making content ideally as also a marketing tool, there is the battle. And this is where the devil's advocate opinion comes in. It's like, well, that's nice, dude. If you make your art into a vacuum and nobody cares about it, like, you will die starving and alone. So where is the balance there? The irony, or the kind of like really kind of amazing thing, is that if you truly do make it for yourself, and it is an expression of the love and energy that is within you, that will be the best marketing you could possibly put out there. You will find your audience, you will find your market, you will find your people far better than chasing something like virality or views, or using the right hook at the beginning of your short form content or whatever. And some of it isn't to say that you shouldn't learn about psychology and learn about tactics, positioning, marketing, branding, colors, communication. Like, all that stuff is actually very fascinating, and it's a whole world in and of itself. But at the base of it all, I do think that as any kind of creator, including business owners and entrepreneurs, like, I tell this to the guys that I work with for personal branding and like offer creation, like, you have to do something that is an outpouring of yourself, because the world, like, I don't like the word saturated, but it's extremely mature. And any of us that are like children of the internet, that were born and raised with somebody trying to sell us something from the time we entered this, like, the world and consciousness, we are extremely finely tuned at detecting bullshit, basically. Like, when is somebody being authentic or inauthentic? And that's impressively does still transmit through the internet and through content. Like, as good as people want to be with like marketing positioning, for whatever reason, there is like an energetic transference through the internet and through content, even if it's frozen in a recorded video. And I think our generation uniquely can smell the bullshit from a mile away, and they're like, this guy's trying to sell me something, but that guy over there, like, he just gives a fuck. Like, he actually cares. Like, for whatever reason, like, I trust that dude. And it is oftentimes that internal knowing. And if you want to be that guy, that second person that I created, that people just deeply resonate with your content, you have to be proud of the content. If you were uploading it and it got 0 views, are you okay with that? If you are uploading it and it got 0 views for a year, are you still okay with that? 2 years, 3 years, like, would you do it in a vacuum of responses because you're proud of the art that you made? And if you can genuinely say yes, and not just in a cope sense, like it's got what you got to deal with, but more like, yeah, I actually just enjoy the process, then you will be rewarded extremely abundantly from the external world.
Just gonna leave a pause after that one. That was, yeah, dude. I love the devil's advocate there, because it's like, yeah, I mean, how many times before the age of 12 had you heard the term starving artist? It's like a lot of artists are just like solely focused on like, oh, I'm just going to make this thing, but then not pay any attention to, the marketing. Right. And I think good artists nowadays, and this is a reminder to myself too, are like, they're also good business people. Like, they are also good marketers. They're also like a whole list of things. They're not just artists. Good artists nowadays like know so many different facets of, like you were saying, like psychology, color theory, things like that. But there is also an aspect too in today's like business world of like peddling bullshit. I think like there's a lot of grifters out there. I love the term grifter. It's just so much fun. And like there are so many people out there, it feels like, that are just like in it to win it for themselves. And they're just like copy and pasting stuff on the internet, and they're not really helping people in any useful way. And I think that's an important distinction. I think, today's artists, and maybe all artists in general, all good recognized artists or artists that are appreciated in any sense of the word, are creating things that are useful to people, whether that's a good piece of art that makes people feel something, like that's useful, right? Like you walk into the Sistine Chapel, Sistine Chapel, like you look up at this. I've never walked into the Sistine Chapel, but this is just an example. I've seen photos of it, and I can imagine, like, just looking at photos, it's like, what an incredible feat of human artistry.
Yeah, I recommend keeping it on the list. I obviously, like, a lot of the branding around what I do is Renaissance focused. So Michelangelo, extremely inspirational. I also recommend a book, Michelangelo Ceiling, pretty cool, like, story on to behind the scenes. But I love what you're.
Sweet.
This isn't to interrupt at all. But I really want to like hammer home the unique time that we live in. Because of the internet, we can have people who are artists as at heart also be able to monetize that passion. Like I like to play with the thought experiment, like what would Van Gogh's life have looked like if he could have uploaded free content to TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram while he was making these masterpieces, right? Like the ability to expose yourself and your art to the world at no cost to you relative to anything but time is a massive lever to pull on if you are truly creating something that is an outpouring of yourself with the intention of just getting that thing that's in you out into the world for its own sake. It's a really special time that we live in. And then what you're talking about with kind of the maybe jump or rush to monetization just to get money coming in, I think it's more of a, and this is like a phrase that I'll steal from Layla Hormozi, which is a dichotomy to be managed rather than a problem to be solved. And all of us have to put food on the table, right? Like there is the baseline, like we have to figure out a way to kind of get through life, make money, and ideally in an extremely abundant way so that we can amplify our mission, amplify our message, etc. But like you said, it should be at the root helping somebody in a real meaningful way, providing some kind of value to either an individual, a group of individuals, collective, etc., and then also be deeply authentic to yourself, where it isn't sacrificing your internal value system, your internal moral code, and it isn't something where I used to make it because I cared a lot about it, and then I saw this one kind of thing really went viral, so I just kept making that one thing, and that's getting me all the views and all the content and all the sales. But I really miss doing X, Y, and Z, but I can't go back to that because blah. Well, no, you started making it, and that was one of the things that you were excited about. A guy that I connected with in Bali, he talks about like with personal branding and just the online space, like being like building a T-shaped brand. T meaning you have like the wide top of the cross being your breadth of interests that you talk all about, and then going vertical and kind of selling one of those at a particular time. But it allows you to be the breadth of human that you are, express all the width of your interests, talk about one of them, be very specific and quote unquote niched so that you can communicate and make an effective business. But down the line, if your passion wanes for that one thing, you just shift the T to some other thing that you've already been talking about. And I think that concept is awesome because it allows you as some kind of content creator to not stress too much or silo yourself in an inhuman way, because no human spirit fits into a well-defined shape. We are all wildly amorphous, strange shaped pegs with no hole to go into. Like it is a lie that we are sold right at the beginning that you'll find your thing or you'll fit into X, Y, and Z box. You need to pick at 18 years old the thing that you're going to study and then do the rest of your life. Like that is a top to bottom fucking scam. It really pisses me off that that's like how the system works. And I feel grateful to have kind of cracked out of it. And I like to offer the perspective to people that may be listening on the younger end of the spectrum, that, or at least offer the permission to not race to find the thing and be like, it's okay that we don't have it figured out. And my encouragement to the younger audience as well is like, go talk to adults. Here's a big one. They don't have it figured out either. Like everybody's just pretending. And when you kind of embody that or internalize that truth, that it's all, everyone's just figuring it out as an ongoing figuring it out, then it gives you permission to be okay with how your unfolding is going.
And I think that's the beauty of like personal brands and like the creator economy in general. I love that idea of like the creation pyramid or the creator T, if you will. I'm sure he has a term for it, but like everybody should have everybody is a personal brand. It's like some are better at marketing than others. It's like you in your friend group are a personal brand. Like your friends think about you in a certain way because of the topics that light you up, that you are excited about, right? So if like your passions are, Buddhism, jump roping, and snowboarding, it's like you can literally make a living doing those three things and sharing about those three damn things online nowadays. Like that is so fucking cool. Like you can literally make a personal brand totally encapsulating those three things. And if you get bored of one, start talking about the other thing, right? And how it impacts your life and how snowboarding is just like Buddhism, and like, because you are your own niche. And Dan Coe talks about that all the time. It's like, that's how you become like the top 1% in any niche. It's like you create your own fucking niche because nobody is you. And there are always going to be people out there that will resonate with your message. There's going to be a hell of a lot more people, or a hell of a lot of people, maybe not more people, but a hell of a lot of people that don't align with who you are, what your message is, right? But who wants to be liked by everybody? Like, what a boring life, like trying to cater to everybody and trying to cater to what everybody likes and is going to say good things about. Like, you're always going to piss people off or just have trolls hitting your line online saying like, oh, like you're a joke, or, whatever it is, right? So I think creating something for everybody, I mean, that's a very cliche term, but you create something for everybody, you create something for nobody, right? Because like at the end of the day, that the intention going into that creation for everybody is seeking validation rather than just a creative expression of who you are. But yeah, I think anybody can, create, and I'm in the process of doing this as well. And it takes time, and it takes love and consistency and effort and patience. But I think anybody can, make a living and make enough money to support themselves doing the thing that they love, or things that they love in today's economy, in today's world, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely an awesome white pill, because a lot of the dialogue, which has always never sat well with me around the internet, and it's ironic because we're all children of the internet, but like people love to just tote on and be like, social media really is fucking people up. Like it's a big problem. And I just like everything, I think it is neutral. It is a thing. You're just choosing how you label it personally. So why not choose to look at it as a unlimited opportunity for yourself, a massive open window for you to step through, rather than this thing that is toxic or whatever. And it can have those effects when used either unconsciously or consciously in a bad way. But likewise, like the other side of that token is that it can be massively empowering to you personally. It can literally afford you the life of your dreams, and ideally also transform thousands and thousands or hundreds of thousands of lives. For anyone that is like also struggling with but what if I don't find my people, or what if it doesn't resonate with a ton of people? Because maybe my little audience that likes snowboarding, Buddhism, and whatever the third thing you said was, skiing, is
jump roping.
If that little group of people, what if that group of people is only 100 people, or what if it's only 1,000 people? There's a great article, and it was like written kind of at the impetus of the internet economy age, called 1,000 True Fans. You can just Google 1,000 True Fans. That article is a massive, massive frame shift. And essentially the thesis, I'll distill it down, but he says that like you only need 1,000 true fans, or on the order of magnitude of 1,000 true fans, to never have want for money for the rest of your life. So it's not in the hundreds, it's not in the tens of thousands, somewhere in the 1,000 range. And he goes on to define what true fan means, like somebody who believes deeply, deeply in your mission, would buy anything you ever sell, whatever. That context, especially for me personally, like as still quote unquote a smaller creator, or at the front end of my journey, which will likely be this kind of very expansive journey over the next decade plus of my life. When you get only a couple hundred views on a piece of short form, or only, for instance, a podcast gets 50 or 60 views. Well, first of all, that's a lecture hall of 50 or 60 people that spent 2 hours with you. Pretty incredible. But on top of that, if they're showing up every single week and they believe deeply in your mission and the thing that you're building, that's 50 of your 1,000. You're moving at a pretty good clip. And if you pick one of those people up a week or a month, you're just building your little army. And it's not just okay, these are the people that are going to pay me, but like that's my tribe. You're building your little corner of the world. And what's likely true is that it'll be vastly more than you anticipate, right? Like you're only aiming for your 1,000 true fans, but in that comfort, in that true expression of yourself, you're going to find 100,000 or 100 million over the lifetime, because authenticity and vulnerability is so magnetic. And yeah, I love that kind of like early adopter mentality, like the people that were there before you blew up, like that. It's like a really fun space to be in as a creator, honestly. And it allows you to not like be self-flagellating, because I obviously, like, I'm a high achiever. I have massive, massive goals for myself personally. And when you keep looking at something that ultimately is an output and out of your control, like viewership, audience size, etc., it can be frustrating. It's like, fuck, like, why isn't this getting views? This person puts this out and blah, blah, blah. Like the comparison game will kill you. But if you just continue to look at that number and say, like, there's my real ones. I saw the like from so-and-so again. They keep showing up to every post. They keep showing up to every podcast. Like, that's really empowering. And to speak to those people now, because they're the ones who have made it to hour 110 of this podcast. Like, I am deeply, deeply grateful for every one of you that are here. likewise, I'm sure you feel exactly the same for everyone that comes to the content. I mean, there's some percentage of people listening for the first time to me from your audience and vice versa. So it's just I don't know, it makes me smile, and it's an exciting space to be in and to share, as I say, like the arena with someone like yourself.
Yeah, it's great that you brought up the 1,000 true fans thing. You touched on a lot of good stuff right there, but I specifically liked the 1,000 true fans piece and the idea of like creating with authenticity. Like, what is authenticity? Just like speaking your truth. Like, what is true for you internally, and not modulating or changing what's going on inside of you and what you want to speak about to fit in. Like, and when you don't do that, when you're being inauthentic and you're creating from an inauthentic place, like it's felt by everybody, and you're attracting people who aren't your true tribe. But when you create authentically, the people that are for you are literally just going to gravitate towards you. Like right now, everybody listening to this like has an opportunity to start broadcasting their unique message that is going to attract the people that are for them and that are going to make their lives much better into their lives via that message. And I think that's so cool. And I think that touches right back on what we were talking about earlier with like setting boundaries. And like when you speak your authentic truth, right? Like the people that are not for you, there's a total mismatch in wavelength, vibration, frequency, whatever you want to call it. And those people are going to exit your life, whether by force or just like bouncing off of each other like magnets, like pushing on same poles. They're just going to repel each other. Whereas when you speak your authentic truth and when you create from a place of authenticity, you know, it might take, like you were saying, like a year, 2 years, 3 years. Like you might be getting like 50 likes on something. You might be getting 1 view on a piece of content, but it's like that consistency added up and compounded is going to turn into 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people that show up on a daily basis to consume whatever it is that you are talking about, teaching. And that's just going to bring more and more incredible people that you fully align with into your life. It's amazing.
Magic. It's magic.
Truly.
and the final thing is that you, through doing all of that, you give the next person permission to do the same. And it's this beautiful amplification effect. And sometimes it does take the person who's a little bit crazier, a little bit more brave, the first person to be like, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z behavior, to give other people permission to be like, I didn't know that it was okay to post content like that, or post your thoughts on your story, or say that you don't want to have a drink at X, Y, and Z event, or maybe not eat the thing that everybody else is eating. Like whatever it is, like when you are brave enough, strong enough, courageous enough to do that thing, to be the first, you open the door and show that there's something on the other side of the door to all the people that get to see that. But this has been really, really excellent. I know we could continue to go on forever. I really appreciate your time, your perspective. I want to move towards the 3 closer questions that I ask for this podcast. We'll have to certainly do another one of these in the future. I'm excited about the future of what this relationship will look like. Potentially, maybe I can go on the intent when we get that wheel cranking again. So,
ASAP.
For sure. But the first of the 3 is, if you could go back to a younger version of yourself and tell him one thing, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a good one. That is a really, 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 really good one. Man, it's tough because, I mean, obviously there's things that I would like my younger self to know, but it's like when you're in a place where, I mean, my life's not perfect right now, but like I love where I'm at. And it's like thinking about going back in time and telling myself a question, or telling myself something that is going to answer a question for them, that would then change where I'm at in my life right now.
Barring the butterfly effect. Barring the butterfly effect, you get to end up where you are now. What does that kid need to hear?
Yeah. Don't force your art to support you. I think would be something that would be very valuable for my younger self to hear. Because there have been a few instances and few periods in my life where I jumped the gun a little bit and started depending and relying on the art that I was creating and the things that I was offering to support me and make me a living. And that made me hate those things. And that made me lose my love for those things because it became work. So I think that would be something that would be super valuable for my younger self to hear. There's a lot of things, but that would be that's just one of the things that pops up into my mind first.
I love it.
Yeah.
The second question is, what is one quote that's always stuck with you or that you try to live by?
Oh man, just one. I'm gonna give you two. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and that is a quote, if you will, from Lao Tzu. I love that one. Like I could sit and think about that, sit and ponder that, contemplate it for hours and hours and hours. And then the second one is in 3 words, kind of, and the 3 words are a paraphrase of a longer like paragraph, but it's from Gandhi, and it's "Be the change." And I think that phrase encompasses a lot of my philosophical, spiritual ideologies and a lot of the ways that I approach reality, namely that you can't change anything outside of you. It's always going to, changes externally are always going to be a result from changes internally.
Amazing. And then finally, what do you believe is your unique gift to give the world?
Oh, dog. Oh, man. I think my unique gift to give the world, just like what we were talking about, it's like every artist is creating from their unique individual expression. And I think that my unique gift to give the world is like my complete, total, undivided, and unadulterated presence. Like my unique energetic signature, completely devoid of all past, unconscious patterning and behavior, and just me living my fully authentic, true life outside of what I think other people think that I should be doing, or just outside of the ideas that I think other people will think of me. I think.
That's amazing. I love that answer. Well, it was an amazing space that we shared today. I appreciate you being vulnerable with your story. Where can the people find you, and what are you excited about that you're working on right now?
Oh man. Yeah. So, the place I am most, I was pretty frequently on Twitter, but now I'm kind of on there, on and off there. But you can find me there at Brian Kimpson. Just handle is at my name, BrianKimpson. And it's the same pretty much on every platform. So that goes for Instagram. And Instagram is the place that I'm most responsive, like, responding to comments, DMs, and stuff like that, constantly posting about what I'm doing, health, wellness, creative endeavors that I'm undergoing and pursuing. And the thing that I'm most, was that the question, thing I'm most excited about right now?
Yeah, that you're working on.
Yeah. Outside of the work that I'm doing in regenerative agriculture, helping a company grow right now, man, I've been fully 100%, a million percent even addicted to learning pottery and throwing on the wheel. And that has just been like unbelievably fun. And have you ever had something in your life that you haven't really done or experimented with, but you've seen it done and you're like, I know that is something that I need to do, and that when I start doing it, I will love doing it, and I probably won't want to stop. Have you ever had something like that?
I have a few inclinations potentially. I don't know that there's been one that I've gone the full cycle through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could be like travel, it could be snowboarding, it could be surfing, but it's just like, man, pottery for me is one of those things. I've like known that it's something that I wanted to do for like such a long time, but never let myself do it. And more recently, just had a conversation with a ceramicist, with the craftsman, and like all it took was like a 2-hour conversation for me to be like, okay, when I get back from Mexico from this trip that I'm on, I'm signing up for a community studio, and I'm all in on it. So I've just been loving doing that. So you can find content of me doing that also on Instagram for anybody interested, and then the Intent podcast as well, which I'm sure we'll link in the show notes.
Amazing. Yeah. All of your stuff will be in the show notes for anyone curious about Brian's stuff. If you want to continue following along this podcast, obviously you found us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever your podcast player. Call to action, subscribe to the YouTube. I've just released my first behind the scenes kind of vlog of like what I'm building, how my life is going. I kind of have been recently inspired to start sharing a little bit more of building what I'm building in parallel to also putting out the podcast. So if that intrigues you, you can go to YouTube, just search my name, Zach Shanken, or the Vitruvian as well. You can follow myself at ZDSCHENKEN on Instagram and Twitter. And other than that, thank you for spending your time and attention, your most valuable resources with myself and Brian today. Memento Mori, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Vitruvian podcast.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.